Attention! Nansen called on Master Hyakujo Nirvana. Hyakujo asked, "Have the sages since time immemorial had a teaching they didn't tell anyone?" Nansen said, "Yes." Hyakujo asked, "What is the teaching they didn't tell anyone?" Nansen said, "It is not mind, not Buddha, not a thing." Hyakujo said, "You said it." Nansen said, "That's all I know. What about you?" Hyakujo said, "I'm not a great teacher either. How would I know if it's been told or not?" Nansen said, "I don't understand." Hyakujo said, "I've already told you too much." Before I go into the koan and what it might mean or how I interpret it, I want to give a little bit of background to put it in context. This koan comes from the Blue Cliff Record, which is a Chan koan collection compiled and published in 1135 in China during the Song dynasty. The koans were selected and the verses added when the collection was compiled by Setcho about 1,000 years ago. This particular koan describes a Dharma encounter or combat between two renowned Chan teachers from the Tang period of early 9th century China. Both these characters, Nansen and Hyakujo, were Dharma brothers and students of Baso, one of the greatest of the Chan teachers, who had over 80 successors. Just think about that for a moment. Taizen Maizumi had 12 successors. He was an active teacher, and he had 12 successors. Baso had 80 Dharma successors. So how big must his temple have been to have that number of successors? Nansen appears in many koans. We know him particularly as the cat killer. In one koan, he's said to have cut a cat in two. And he's also known as Joshu's teacher. Hyakujo here is not the Hyakujo that appears in the Hyakujo's Fox koan, which some people may know. Hyakujo is actually the name of a temple and a mountain. And there were at least 3 teachers who took the name Hyakujo. Hyakujo Nihan in this koan was Nansen's slightly older Dharma brother. Apparently he was an expert on the Nirvana Sutra, which is how he got his nickname, Hyakujo Nirvana. There's an interesting story about Nihan. At this time in 9th century China, there were many wandering monks travelling around from temple to temple looking for teaching and visiting various masters. And the story is that Nihan would invite the monks to work his fields in return for teaching. So the monks were busy doing his farming, and then in the evening they'd go to him and say, "Can we have some teaching now?" And he'd say, oh, tomorrow, and put them off and get another day's work out of them. And eventually the monks begged him for teaching, so he gathered them all together, and then he stood in front of them with his arms open, and he said, "Nothing." And his teaching was, "Your work is the Dharma, your work is the teaching. There's nothing more I need to say." What a brilliant way to get your farming done for free. He's a slippery character, this Hyakujo Nihan. I quite like him. Now, let's go to the koan. So Nansen calls on Master Hyakujo Nirvana. Now, I'm assuming that these two knew each other because they were Dharma brothers, they trained together, and I think they probably had Dharma combat before. I don't know about you, but when I read these koans, I often wonder who else was present to record this stuff. I mean, you couldn't make it up. There had to be somebody there writing this stuff down. I think of this koan as a tennis match. And Hyakujo has the first serve. And he says, "Have the sages since time immemorial had a teaching they didn't tell anyone?" And Nansen says, "Yes." What a confident reply. No messing there, yes. It seems that Nansen knows what all the teachers since time immemorial have said, or not said. Or is he just young and arrogant? When I first read this, I thought, the teaching that hasn't been told. So there is a secret. Because I don't know about you, but when I first came to this practice, just after my dad died, I was kind of looking for the answer to life, the universe and everything. I was looking for a secret teaching, and that's how I came to be here. And I think I'm not alone. I think a lot of us are seekers after some sort of truth. Isn't that why we end up at these kind of groups? So when I read this, I thought, so what is this teaching that hasn't been told? And why hasn't it been told? Or is it something that can't be told, only discovered? Anyway, Hyakujo's return ball here is a little dolly over the net, hoping to set up a winner perhaps. And he says, "Oh, what is the teaching they didn't tell anyone?" And Nansen said, "It's not mind, it's not Buddha, it's not a thing." Again, a nice, clear, confident return. Nansen's obviously on good form here. But notice, Nansen doesn't say what the teaching is, he says what it's not. It's not mind, it's not Buddha, it's not a thing. And I think it's also worth saying that there are other versions of this koan. So in one of the other versions I've seen, it says that Nansen's words here were, "This is not mind, this is not Buddha, this is not a thing." The other thing that I think is significant here is that both these guys, Nansen and Hyakujo, were students of Baso. And there's a case, I think it's case 30 in the Mumonkan, there's a koan, where a monk goes to Baso and says, what is Buddha? And Baso says, "This very mind is Buddha." And then a bit later on, Baso's teaching changes. In a later case in the Mumonkan, a monk asks him the same question, and he says, "Not mind, not Buddha." So I think it's interesting, because to me, what Nansen is doing here is echoing his teacher's words. It is not mind, it is not Buddha, it is not a thing. So Hyakujo's response to this is, "You said it." Now, this is a funny one, isn't it? Is he saying, "You said it, bro, right on, I'm agreeing with you"? I don't think so. We could do. Because there's other versions of the koan where Hyakujo's words are recorded as, "You've preached like that." Now, preaching is kind of the sin. You don't preach. So I think if you look at it in those terms, I think what Hyakujo's saying is that Nansen isn't being very fresh here in his teaching. This is not untold teaching. This has been said before by Baso. And Nansen is talking about Zen. So I don't think Hyakujo's very impressed. Is Nansen bothered? No. Nansen says, "That's all I know. What about you?" Nice blocked return there, challenging Hyakujo. I think he's quite unconcerned by Hyakujo's criticism. He seems to be saying, within Buddha nature, within this great life, we each live and experience life in different ways. So what if I'm talking about Zen? Isn't that inevitable for us as teachers? How can we avoid it? Anyway, this is how I see things. What about you? And Hyakujo, being the wily character that he is, and we've already seen he's a bit of a slippery customer, returned full of spin now. He says, I'm not a great teacher either. How would I know whether it's been told or not? Is he being modest? I mean, these guys were renowned teachers. Is he being sarcastic? Or is he trying to put Nansen down? Because Nansen's first reply, he seems to suggest that he knows what all the sages since time immemorial have said. And here's Hyakujo saying, I'm not a great teacher either. How would I know if it's been told or not told? Nansen's reply, I think, is a defensive one. He says, I don't understand. Is that true? Does he really not understand? Or is he pretending? Is he trying to draw Hyakujo out to prolong this game of tennis a little bit, get Hyakujo to say what he thinks? If that is his hope, he fails. Because having raised the topic of the untold teaching, having said very little about it himself, Hyakujo then closes with this final shot of this enigmatic exchange, and he says, I've told you too much already. Genius. This guy's a genius. What's the final score in this game? No idea. No idea. So, how do we interpret the koan? Many koans are based on encounters between a teacher and a student, usually a monk. And usually, as we know, the monk is enlightened by the exchange. But this is different. This is an encounter between two teachers who I think are reflecting on their situation. Because, as I see it, at the heart of the teaching role is a dilemma. Bodhidharma defines Zen as a special transmission outside the scriptures, without dependence on words or letters, directly pointing to the mind, seeing one's true nature and attaining Buddhahood. So without dependence on words or letters. And in the Diamond Sutra it says that Buddha on his deathbed said, for 49 years I have preached not a word. There's a saying in Zen that truth cannot be told and should not be preached. But if you're not supposed to talk about Zen or preach, how do teachers instruct beginners or those searching for the way? How do you do that? Isn't that one of the themes of the koan, that you can say too much? The idea of the unsayable has got a long history in spiritual practice. I mean, for example, Lao Tzu's work, the ancient work, the Tao Te Ching, starts out by saying, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Tao means way. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. In other words, according to Lao Tzu, if you can say what it is, then by definition, that's what it's not. But there's a problem here, isn't there? As students, don't we want explanations? Isn't that what we're looking for? Isn't that why we're followers of the way? Isn't that why we look to teachers for guidance? For me, the heart of this koan is not the verbal duel between Hyakujo and Nansen, but Hyakujo's first key question: what is the teaching that has not been told, and by implication, why hasn't it been told? You could see this koan in terms of separation between the relative and the absolute, between teacher and student. That's one way of approaching things from a relative perspective. But from an absolute perspective, don't these distinctions just drop away anyway? Perhaps when body and mind drop off, the teaching that can't be told is so obvious it doesn't need saying. I think Nansen is right. I think there is an untold teaching, even though teachers have always spilled their guts and given everything they can. So for each of us, what is the teaching that hasn't been told, and how can we discover it for ourselves? Joko Beck writes about this in a piece in Everyday Zen on authority. And she asks, who is the real authority in our lives? Who's the real expert on your life or mine? Why do we have to look elsewhere for answers? Some things can only be discovered. How? How? There's only one teacher, life itself. But being our own authority doesn't mean developing our own concepts about life. I want to turn to the verse, Setcho's verse, where he comments. It's written up here. Setcho's commentary on this koan. But I think it's important to start by going back to the context of this and the background I described earlier on. We're talking about events that occurred in the early 9th century and Setcho's commentary on this from 1,000 years ago, from a different culture, different language. And it's important also to say that there are different translations of the verse. For example, there's another translation of this verse which says, patriarchs and Buddhas have not preached, yet monks run after preachers. Clear mirror on the stand, sharply imaging. Looking southward, see the Great Bear. The shaft hangs down, where do you find it? Saving your nostrils, you have lost your mouth. So my point is that we mustn't get too lost in the details of the particular translation. It's the spirit behind the words which is the important thing. But let's look at this verse. Zen masters and Buddhas have never helped people. Really? Isn't that why we're here? I know Kaizen senses helped me a lot. Isn't that why we go to Zen? But help in what sense? So Buddha said on his deathbed, for 49 years I preached not a word. But do we want to be told? Is that what we're looking for? Are we looking for somebody else to do the work for us? Or are we looking for a map, a guide, somebody to say, there is a way, others have gone before, you can do this too. Seekers, past and present, run as if racing. Don't we run around like headless chickens from group to group, looking for answers in different places? Are we looking outside ourselves or within? When a clear mirror is set up, the range of images is distinct. In Zen, the mind is often likened to a mirror. So in the Platform Sutra, where it describes how the 6th patriarch succeeded, there was that competition about reciting, polishing a mirror. So the mirror is often used as an analogy for the mind. Each one faces south to see the northern dipper. And this is what, again, when I want to come back to this thing about the cultural background, this is 1,000 years old, this commentary. I just don't think, as modern city folk, we get these images, these descriptions of stars and night skies and stuff. I think it's just completely outside our experience, isn't it? I mean, when was the last time you studied the night sky? Most of us live in cities. There's so much light pollution, bright lights, car headlights. we live indoors, we don't see the night sky. Up to a little more than a century ago, before electric lights were invented, people were really familiar with the night sky. They lived outside more. They knew that the stars rotated in the night sky. I don't think we do. The special thing about the Great Bear or the Plough or the Northern Dipper, it's got many names. It actually looks like a saucepan with a long handle. And part of the saucepan always points at the North Star, the pole star. So during the night, you can actually see the night sky rotate. Of course, what's happening is the Earth's spinning. The stars stay where they are, but it appears as though the night sky rotates. So the handle of this Big Dipper, which points at the pole star, seems to go around like the hands of a clock. Now, ancient people would have been really familiar with this. I'm not sure that we are today. Maybe I'm wrong. So logically, looking south to see the Dipper doesn't make sense, but sometimes we have to change our whole way of looking at things. But do directions matter? Here we are in the same place. This side of the rear band is looking out of the window. This side's looking at the wall, but we're in the same place. The Dipper handle hangs down. There's no place to look for it. It's right here, pointing at us, at me. We don't have to run around looking. It's right here. What is? And the last line, and the strangest of all, one may take up the nostrils, but lose the mouth. I really wonder if there wasn't some ancient Chinese proverb along these lines. It's so weird. One may take up the nostrils and lose the mouth. There is a view that this has got to do with, like, if you think logically, you lose instinct, and if you think instinctively, you lose logic. But I think there's a much simpler explanation for this one. One may take up the nostrils but lose the mouth. If you think what happens when you go underwater, close your mouth, you're holding your breath, and for a few minutes you're okay, and then suddenly you need to breathe, and you stick your head up out of the water, and you take a big breath. You have to breathe. Either your nose or your mouth has to be open. You can't have them both closed. One or the other has got to be open. If you lose one, you've still got the other. Lose that one, you've still got the other one. There was a koan where Basso again and Hyakujo were going for a walk, and some wild ducks flew over, and Basso says, "Where have they gone?" And Hyakujo says, "They've flown away." And Basso grabs his nose and twists. Says Hyakujo. And Basso says, "When exactly was this flown away?" So he's grabbed the nose and he's lost his mouth. The way I see this, isn't the teaching always right under our noses anyway? Isn't the teaching always as plain as the nose on your face? Isn't the teaching as simple and as basic in a way as the next breath? One way or another, you've got to breathe, either through the nose or the mouth, but it's right here. Or maybe not, anyway. That's my very partial and incomplete perspective. At least it is today. There's a verse about this case, and I've asked Benji to recite it.
Zen masters and Buddhas never helped people. Seekers past and present run as if racing. When a clear mirror is set up, the range of images is distinct. Each one faces south to see the northern dipper. The dipper handle hangs down. There is no place to look for it. One may take up the nostrils, but lose the mouth. Zen masters and Buddhas never helped people. Seekers past and present run as if racing. When a clear mirror is set up, the range of images is distinct. Each one faces south to see the northern dipper. The dipper handle hangs down. There is no place to look for it. One may take up the nostrils but lose the mouth. Zen masters and Buddhas never helped people. Seekers past and present run as if racing. When a clear mirror is set up, the range of images is distinct. Each one faces south to see the northern dipper. The dipper handle hangs down. There is no place to look for it. One may take up the nostrils but lose the mouth. One may take up the nostrils but lose the mouth. The inexhaustible lion's roar!
How will you handle this, Shane? Freely giving life and taking it away.